Me and my friends were sort of urban explorers. Only difference is, these houses aren't abandoned. You heard me right. Some nights, when me and my friends are bored, we go out and loot houses. We choose our prey carefully. Usually houses when there are no cars in the parking lot, and no ADT protected sign on the lawn. Each of us took a pillowcase, and we creep around, picking up valuables like jewelry, nice clothes, and electronics. I didn't think it was a good idea when my friend Paul first suggested it, but he convinced me, saying that we were just robbing wealthy people with more money than they knew or what to do with, and there was nothing in their homes that they couldn't just replace. And he was right. We live up in California. Everyone here has a good sum of money to their names, so we weren't doing them much harm by taking in a couple of belongings with them while they were out. Okay, scratch that. We were just straight up crooks. But at the time, being a broke teenager who moved down here to make a living and finding that no one was interested in my awful singing and now struggling to pay rent, I had sort of a grudge against those who I had made. So I went out with my three friends one night to do just one place, got myself a Blu-ray player and a pair of expensive shoes, and found myself hooked. Ever since we started, every time I'd walk around my neighborhood, I'd see every house as another potential target for intrusion. I was subconsciously watching what people did every day, where they go, what time they leave, when they come back, how big the house was. I didn't even notice I was doing it at first. The house I was most interested in was 2 streets away from mine, a 2-story home that looked older than any of the surrounding buildings. It was strange how it stood out among the other homes, and that it looked like nobody maintained the lawn. There was never a vehicle parked out front, no one is ever in the yard, the lights were never on, but I never let my friends know about it. I felt like not knowing who lived there, what they looked like, or what they did made me more uneasy about breaking into their house than breaking into the house of someone I saw going to work every day. I wasn't even sure if someone did live there. All signs would point to no, but signs, or lack thereof, is just what got me. There were no for sale, for rent, or even condemned signs outside the house. The house was just there. But finally, one night, when me and my friends, Paul, Richard, and Michael were hanging out in Richard's home, and Paul was thinking of places to head to despite us having picked up from every home we felt like we could get away with, I finally mentioned the old home. This seemed like any other standard break-in. We showed up at the house around 2 in the morning. Over the course of our lucrative career, we have become better and better at getting the houses. As we walked around to the back door, and Richard picked the lock, simple enough. As my friends filed through the open door, I began feeling really nervous. Do we even know who lives here? I asked. No, said Paul, but if you did, you probably wouldn't have the heart to rob them. I laughed, knowing this to be true, but that feeling of unease didn't leave me. Now, however, I knew for sure someone had lived here. The back door led us into a dusty kitchen, vintage table and chairs, an old fridge that didn't make any noise. Maybe it was either soul that it had broken, or the lights had been shut off in this house, which gave off an unkempt atmosphere either way. But once we were out of the kitchen, through a set of double doors, we found ourselves in the living area. It had a rather old television sitting on the floor, pieces of writing paper on the floor in front of it, a musty couch sat against the wall, a coffee table with an old cup sitting on it was sitting in the corner of the room. Michael picked up one of the pieces of paper, turned it over, and then looked back at us. Just some children's drawing, he said, and he threw it back to the ground among the other papers. So whoever owns this place has kids? Asked Richard. They had kids, but they're probably adults by now. This place has definitely been abandoned, I said, now feeling slightly more comfortable, as the fear of someone waking up and calling the police slowly subsided. Yuck! Shrieked Richard. What is it? Asked Michael. We looked down and saw that he had stepped in what looked like a bowl of soup had been left lying on the floor for God knows how long. Insects scattering as he did so. He took a soggy foot out of the bowl, threw off his shoe, and looked at it in disgust. Hey, look at this, called Paul, who was fiddling with the television. He lifted a dusty old PlayStation 2 in his hand. Sweet, I replied, now fully convinced everything would be fine. Paul shoved the PlayStation into his bag and kept looking for more valuable objects. The room was pretty bare bones, so we moved on to other parts of the house. There were 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a hall closet. Paul took the master bedroom, Richard the hall closet, and Michael and I each took one of the smaller rooms. When I entered the room, a cold chill crept over me. There was a desk with a large early 2000s PC on it. I thought this might be a cool find, but realized I had no way to fit this in my bag. I tried to turn it on, but it wouldn't start. Still, the power might have been out, so it might still work. I decided to check the rest of the room before dedicating my time to the computer. Although the computer was the centerpiece of the room, other technological goodies littered the room as well. What looked like some kind of audio recording device like you'd see in a music studio, and accompanying sound equipment like a microphone. It looked pretty expensive, so I didn't hesitate to pick it up. I was walking around picking up random shit when I saw it. A large oak shelf filled with VHS tapes. They all had sloppily written words on them like YY86, SM3, and the one that caught my eye, DBZ7. I knew DBZ to be the acronym for Dragon Ball Z. For those of you who don't know, Dragon Ball Z was a Japanese anime based on a long-running manga series. It's about a guy named Goku and his friends protecting Earth from a bunch of villainous things like aliens and androids. It was really popular in America when Funimation dubbed it in English. In fact, the dubbed version was one of my favorite shows in the late 90s, and sudden realization hit me. YYH must have been Yu Yu Hakusho, another show I once liked. SM was probably Sailor Moon, and from there, I guess this whole show was just full of old anime tapes. I grabbed a few Dragon Ball tapes and threw them in my bag. The room had a large closet, but I didn't really care to check it. Not only had I already picked up a good few pieces of tech, but if my guess was correct, some good stuff to watch when I got home. Besides, I could come back and check this place out again another day, as I knew for sure that nobody lived here anymore. I loved watching Dragon Ball Z as a kid, but I had so little money in the past few years that I couldn't even afford the cheap box set DVDs of the show. But now I could go home and relive my childhood and such. I rejoined my friends in the hallway where we discussed our finds. Paul had found a gold watch, some suits, a DVD player, and some old films. Richard didn't find shit, but then what did you expect you would find in a hall closet? Michael had gone into the room that belonged to whatever child had drawn the pictures in the living room and found some nice things, some action figures and cars that might be worth some money. I told my friends about what I found, and Michael said he'd come back tomorrow with his truck to help me get the computer. On the way out of the house, I stopped by the TV in the living room and checked to see if the family owned a VHS player. Luckily, they did. I threw it into my bag and followed my friends out the door. We hung out at my house after that, because it was the closest, and looked at what we got. I hooked up the tape player to my television, and thankfully it still worked. But my friends weren't interested in it, instead wanted to try the PS2 Paul found. We managed to get it to start after screwing around with the wires. The light would only come on if the power cord was bent in a certain position and that it couldn't sit in naturally, so eventually we just sat the console on top of the wire. The game inside was some first-person shit where you walk around in an old lab that's being overrun by other dimensional aliens. I didn't really care. I just watched them play, taking turns using the controller, waiting for them to go home so I could watch my videos. Soon enough, they picked up the goods and bade me goodnight. I instantly hooked up the player and popped in the earliest tape in my lot, DBZ7. Sure enough, it was a Dragon Ball tape, but rather than one of the English intros like Rock the Dragon, they played the original Japanese theme song, Cha-La Head Cha-La. I was a little angry because I didn't really like subtitle anime, but after the theme finished and the last time on Dragon Ball Z segment plus started, I was happy to hear an English narrator, but I didn't recognize his voice. He sounded nothing like the official English voice. He sounded like a middle-aged Japanese man. I could tell from the footage that this episode was from the Android Saga, where some evil robots tried to kill the main character of the series, Goku. But the narrator didn't call them androids, he called them artificial humans, just like the translated manga did. Not only that, but he called Goku Son Goku, his original Japanese name, and pronounced Saiyan as Saiyan, instead of the more commonly used English pronunciation, Saiyan. That was then I realized that there was no way this was official, and I got a little excited. Back in the early 2000s, you could go down to some local video shop and buy a fan-made English subtitle version of the Japanese Dragon Ball Z, but I had never seen any kind of fan-made English dub. I was interested in how this would play out, but was a little disappointed as the episode went along. Almost all the characters were voiced by the same person who played the narrator, clearly putting on voices that had varying degrees of effectiveness. The alien Piccolo, Goku's rival Vegeta, and Goku's best friend Krillin, here called Kuririn, all had the same gravelly voice used for them, and all had different pitches. Goku himself had a sort of Southern American accent put on, or as much of a Southern American accent as someone who sounded native to Japan could do. The only other voice actor in the show was a woman, who played literally every female character in the show with no differences between them. But despite all these flaws, I got a bit addicted to this version. I hadn't seen this show in years and had no other way to see it, so this would at least saturate my desire for the show. And I found this crappy voices kind of endearing. Like someone really dedicated to the series wanted to make something more accurate to the Japanese version than the official English dub. The first episode I had was the one where Goku came down with a heart virus, leaving Vegeta to battle Angel 19. Or I guess he was artificial human number 19? And the last episode I had was the one where Piccolo encounters the monster cell in the middle of an abandoned town. I watched every episode I had in that one night, and I still wanted more. I always considered going back to that old house and grabbing a few more tapes, but knew that since the sun was coming up, someone would probably see me. So I decided I would just go back that night when Michael went to pick up the computer. Besides, it was around 7 in the morning, and I had to go on my job at Starbucks at 9, so I used the time that I had left to sleep. After another day of staying behind the counter, getting people their coffee, and wishing to get that I had one that morning, I returned home tired as hell. I collapsed on my couch and decided I couldn't watch more Dragon Ball Z. So I pumped in one of the tapes I got yet again. This time I noticed some things I hadn't before. For one, there was a lot of background noise. I could hear what sounded like the only other voice actress talking to someone in the background of a few episodes. In one scene where Piccolo is talking to Cammy, referred to simply as God in this dub, I could hear a door opening in the background, and then the sound cutting out for a second before coming back in. I also didn't realize who censored this dub was. It mainly covered stuff like covering up some innocent nudity in one episode, and removing a scene of Vegeta getting his arm broken by artificial human number 18. But I couldn't figure out why this was. If this was fan-made, was only going to be viewed by other fans of the series, and wasn't even going to air on television, why would it need to be censored? Regardless, these kept me entertained until that night, when Michael came over to my house to pick me up and bring me back to the old home. He parked his truck in some trees behind the house so he wouldn't be spotted, and we made our way back in. The door was still unlocked from the night before, so we didn't need Richard's lockpicking skills. We made our way back into the studio room and picked up the computer. I grabbed the monitor and he picked up the tower, since he's stronger than me, or at least he thinks he is. He ended up dropping the damn thing on his foot halfway back to the truck. "Nice work. If it wasn't broken before, you made sure it is now," I said. "Oh, shut up," Michael said, picking the tower back up. We put our load in the back of the truck and then headed back inside to get whatever was left. He picked up the mouse and wires and such, and I headed back over to the oak shelf to grab some more videotapes. This time I grabbed DBZ 8.1, DBZ 8.2, DBZ 8.3, DBZ 9.1, and DBZ 9.2. I couldn't find any others at the time, but I wasn't worried. I was sure at this point that this wouldn't be the last time I came here. We headed back to the truck, and both our hearts sank when we saw blue and red lights in the distance. I realized someone must have heard when Michael dropped the computer and called the cops. We quickly hopped back into the truck and sped off toward my house. Luckily, the trees concealed the truck enough for us to lose the cops, and we were able to make it back to my house. We sat in the truck, our hearts pounding for a good 3 minutes once we got back to my house. We had never had any trouble with the cops before. We were usually more well organized than that. So of course, we almost paid dearly for that moment of weakness. Finally, after collecting ourselves, we grabbed the computer and brought it into my house to see if it worked. I inspected the machine for damage and was surprised when I couldn't find any company branding on it. "So," I said, "what do you think it is? Dell? HP? It's a piece of shit, Michael snarked, pressing the power button only to get no response. I wasn't really expecting it to work. You had been sitting in that house completely abandoned since at least the mid-2000s. I won't be shocked if the thing was full of dead insects. Never mind that. Want to watch some Dragon Ball? I suggested. Michael agreed, and I took out the tape I had watched earlier that day and put in DBZ 8.1. We had a good time. I enjoyed seeing the look of disgust on Michael's face when he heard the atrocious voice work. And speaking of disgust, I noticed that one of the most iconic scenes in the show, the one where the monster cell stabs its tail into a man's back and drains him of his insides, was completely missing. Something that didn't get Michael either. He laughing at all the silly bits of editing that removed anything remotely graphic, like Piccolo ripping his own arm off and the brawl battle against Artificial Human No. 17 having most of its best moments taken out. But that was when I realized something. Artificial Human No. 18 is unique in being the only female android in the bunch. She was voiced by the same woman who voiced every other woman in the show, but once Cell showed up and attacked the artificial humans, she was being voiced by the same person who did everyone else, doing a terrible girly voice. Michael laughed out loud when he heard her speak, but I was shocked. She had never sounded like this before, and when it cut to another scene featuring the character Chi-Chi, who was also female, she was being voiced the same way. For the entire next tape, we never heard from the female again. Where do you think the girl went? I asked. Who cares? Honestly, I like this guy more. His delivery is much more emotional. And he was right. I didn't notice at first, but around the same time the woman disappeared, the voice work had gotten a lot better. He sounded like he was really putting his heart into his performance. In a way, this made the dub a lot better. But why the sudden change? We had soon gone through every video in the bunch, ending when Cell had absorbed both of the artificial humans, achieved his perfect form, and was just about to battle Vegeta. Michael stayed over at my house that night. He was too scared to head home in case the cops were still after us. I stayed up in bed that night, wondering if there were any more tapes in the old house, and if it would be safe to go back. I turned over and tried to shake the thought from my head. You don't need more of that. It's just some amateur dubbing by some guy and his friend. Besides, you already know how the next few episodes go. Cell starts up the tournament to see if anyone in the world can beat him. Goku puts his son Gohan into the tournament only for him to be brutalized by Cell. That is until Android 16 gives Gohan a motivational speech about nature or something like that, and Gohan finds the power within him to beat Cell. I had seen all this on TV many years ago, and still remember Gohan's transformation as one of my favorite Dragon Ball moments. Finally, I drifted off to sleep. That night, I had a nightmare. Me and my friends were hanging out in the old house, and Paul was trying to convince me to go rob a house he found. I seemed really against the idea, but then Michael and Richard put a straitjacket and muzzle on me and moved me along anyway. We walked down the sunny streets of my city, with everyone staring at us like we were in the most normal sight in the world, till eventually we arrived at the small, unkempt wooden house that was overtaken by nature. We strided out to the front door. Paul opened the door and we all moved inside. The place looked much more well kept on the inside, looking like your average 50s home. Flowery drapes, a leather coach, an old couch, and an old rabbit-ear TV. My friends moved into another room without me. I tried to follow them, but I couldn't move for some reason. Suddenly, from down the hall, I could hear a door opening. A tall figure walked down the hall, remained draped in shadow until he was standing right in front of my face, and I saw him. It was Son Goku, with a look of pure malice on his face. What are you doing in my house? He growled, before pulling his arm back and punching me in the face. I jolted it back, and my body slammed against the wall behind me. I awoke then and there to see that I had sat up in my sleep and banged my head on the wall behind my bed. Michael came in to see what the noise was, but I just told him I hit my head in my sleep and would never let me live down the shame if I told him I had a nightmare about Goku beating me up. That's the kind of thing a child would say. I had the day off of work the next morning, but I never wished more than I didn't have to work. With nothing distracting me, I spent the whole day thinking about the Dragon Ball dub, feeling like I wanted nothing more than to go into that house one more time. My friends were against it because me and Michael almost got caught there last night, but even knowing that, Even knowing that the police may have had the whole area taped off, I still wanted to go back. I wound up walking back to my house that day. Paul offered to give me a ride home since I don't have a car, but I refused. I wanted to be in a position where I walked by that house, and my friends knew this. They didn't want me to, but there was nothing they could do to stop me. What were they going to do? Put me under house arrest? Fine, said Paul. If you want to get caught, fine. But you better not run us in the station. I didn't say anything. I simply walked out of the house and slammed the door behind me. I speed walked down the sidewalk, my heart pumping in my chest until I saw it. The old house, still as empty looking as ever. The police didn't even search the place. Lucky me. I almost went into the house then and there, but I knew it wasn't safe. There was no way I could get away with robbing this place in broad daylight, so I continued on my way home and simply lounged around, watching some of my older Dragon Ball tapes until nightfall. As soon as the sun was tucked out of sight and the moon was high in the sky, I ran back out to the house and went for the back door as usual. I noticed I was getting worse and worse at sneaking into this place every time I did it, but it didn't matter. Because this would be the last time I knew it, I never noticed how dead this place was when you were in alone, with only bugs for company. Hearing the sound of the house every now and then made me jump as I went through the other tapes on the shelf. I went through rows and rows of tapes, tossing some onto the floor to get to the ones behind them, but there were no more DBZ tapes. My heart sank. Had the dub stopped there?